So I just saw Purple Shrek and the Infinity Crystals, and it was decent. I never thought I'd be saying this, but I was actually kind of pleasantly surprised. My biggest concern with this film was just how many main characters there are. I was kind of expecting the story would just be one giant incomprehensible mess, but they actually kind of pulled it off in a way. There's still a lot of this film that feels like the standard average Marvel movie, but there's also a few things going for it that helps it stand out a little. For one, it actually feels like there's some sense of consequence in this film, which is a feeling that I've been generally unable to experience in any other Marvel movie. There's some interesting concepts at play that make the action a lot more entertaining for me. I really enjoyed how certain characters were able to manipulate space and time and reality. It's so much more interesting to me than just regular superhero fighting. Like, haha, I'm really strong. No, I'm much stronger. I know we're both really strong. Well, I have a laser. Well, I have a laser that shoots from my head. Well, I am a billionaire and I can make lots of crazy things and shoot even bigger lasers. Up until this point, much of the action in Marvel films just felt like a little kid smashing action figures together, but the way that certain action scenes were executed in this film, it actually kept my attention. Surprisingly enough, I think that the overabundance of characters actually helped the pacing a little. I felt like I got a lot more fun action out of this movie compared to the previous ones I've watched. It felt like there were a lot less boring political drama style filler scenes, perhaps because moving things along was an absolute necessity for this film. The Marvel movies that I had previously enjoyed the most were the ones that didn't really try to take themselves way too seriously. Guardians of the Galaxy and Spider-Man Homecoming left fairly good impressions on me on my first watch, but after letting them sit for a while and realizing I had no real motivation to revisit them, I'm not so sure I loved them all that much. I gave both of those films a 7 out of 10 rating in my Quickie, but I recently changed them to a 6, which, keep in mind, is still a positive rating. What really stands out to me about Infinity War is that it's the first Marvel movie I could actually enjoy for reasons other than it not taking itself too seriously. For the most part, the drama felt real and the conflict felt important. There wasn't really all that much soap opera bickering in comparison to the other Marvel movies. There were some brief moments with Iron Man where he did that whole, Spider-Man, you're not allowed to be an Avenger, you're just irresponsible, you're a little boy, you can't do anything, you're not allowed. But it didn't take up too much of the film, so it wasn't really all that big of a deal. Now, despite being able to take the serious scenes more seriously, there was another unexpected problem, and it's that the comic relief scenes were not very good at all. Every time we got a scene with the Guardians of the Galaxy characters, the film just came to a grinding halt. All of the jokes were really forced and terribly unfunny, which was made even more unbearable from the uproarious laughter in the theater. Apparently every single shitty joke in the film was the funniest thing that any of them had ever heard in their entire lives. There was one joke near the end of a scene that I actually thought was kind of clever. I'm not going to spoil it, but let's just say it's a clever play on words from Rocket Raccoon addressed to Groot. But then the entire theater was completely silent, and I felt so incredibly sad and alone. I think it's safe to say that I don't really have all that much in common with the most hardcore Marvel fans. I'll never really understand why people feel the need to clap as soon as their favorite character shows up on screen. There was one person in the theater that was clapping more than anybody else there, and they were also on their fucking phone more than anyone else there. I honestly don't even know what movies really are to you. At one moment, you're acting as though this film is the most important thing in your entire life, and the next moment, you're dicking around on your phone with full brightness. What's your fucking deal? Whenever I go to see Marvel movies, I usually go with a friend who's a legitimate fan of the MCU, and I kind of feel bad for them because they just want to sit and enjoy the movie, but there's never been a time where the audience hasn't been completely obnoxious. I'd almost suggest to avoid seeing it the opening week, but then they just have to stay away from the internet that whole time. There were certain expectations I had for the story and how things would end in this part 1 of a film, and I'm happy to say that this film went in directions that I did not anticipate. The film is fairly long with a runtime of 2.5 hours, but it never really seemed to drag on too much at all. I don't really have any major complaints about this film. I mean, the humor was really bad and some parts were kind of predictable, but in my opinion, I would consider this to be one of the better Marvel films. Anyway, the movie was fairly well shot. It was much less visually stale compared to something like Spider-Man Homecoming, which was plagued with uninspired shot-reverse shot style filmmaking. The acting was all well done, and there were a few scenes where actors were really given an opportunity to shine. The music was also well done and seemed to have more of a presence than usual. There's no single aspect to this film that I felt blew me away. It didn't exactly push boundaries or do anything particularly exceptional, but overall, it was a good, enjoyable film. I enjoyed watching it even though I didn't really expect I would. I may not enjoy every Marvel movie but this is one that I feel deserves at least a bit of credit, and I'm giving this one a 6 out of 10, maybe a 7 later, probably not. It's definitely not a 5. I think a 6 is pretty good, so that's it. That's a 6. Thank you. Hey, if you want to hear even more talking about Purple Shrek and the Infinity Crystals, we're going to talk about that on the next episode of Sardonicast, a movie podcast that I started with I Hate Everything and Ralph the Movie Maker. We haven't even recorded it yet, but it should be out on May 7th, so subscribe to the channel and stay tuned. Thank you.